Hi everyone, I'm Rabina.
And I'm Layla.
Welcome back to our channel, Nutrition Unpacked,
where we try diets so you don't have to.
So we just did a 7-day mindful eating challenge. How'd it go?
Not great.
I dropped the ball so hard, more so than I probably ever have in my entire life.
Out of all the challenges, somehow this was the easiest, but also the hardest.
I just kept forgetting. Complete and utter fail. I literally just left Layla's place after filming the first video on mindful eating. I'm on my way somewhere else and I had to quickly grab lunch before heading over. I'm just casually scrolling through TikTok and wolfing down my food. Completely forgot about this week's challenge. It's almost embarrassing.
Yeah, I kept forgetting too.
I am working right now and I kind of got bored, so I stepped away from my computer and I started eating these raisins. As you can see, I've eaten like all of these raisins since yesterday. And honestly, it just makes me really think about how mindlessly I eat. I literally was just bored, so I'm eating these raisins, but look at me, mindlessly eating. And like, I didn't think anything of it until I remembered like, oh shit, I gotta be recording what I'm eating. And I'm like, oh, I'm eating these and I'm eating them mindlessly. So, you know, we're all guilty of mindless eating, or at least I am. During my week, I was supposed to be mindful eating.
But also like just my motivation to do it wasn't really there.
I really hope that mindful eating doesn't start while you're preparing your food, because if I can't be watching my videos while I am eating my food, I'm definitely gonna be doing it while I'm preparing breakfast.
I think that was a part of it too, but I was genuinely forgetting. Like every single time I would get in the shower being like, oh yeah, I was supposed to mindfully eat today.
Yeah, I'd be like halfway through eating something and then be like, oh, sugar.
Even times where I would sit down and I was like, I'm gonna mindfully eat, like I'd like black out and all of a sudden I'm on TikTok. I'm still eating, but I just caught myself. Somehow I ended up on TikTok. I don't even know what happened. I picked up my phone and I was on TikTok. This is hard. It's really hard to just sit here and eat. How did this happen? What is happening? How did I end up here? I'm gonna say it wasn't my fault.
I don't think it's your fault. I think eating is pretty freaking boring.
So I'm on my last few bites here of oatmeal and I'm still hungry. And also I'm really bored. And also like, I might not eat more because I'm so bored. I'm so bored. But I do have some leftover raisins from our little experiment, or like our little, not experiment, but our little trial of mindful eating. So I'll eat some of these. Oh, sorry, I've got to do this mindful. Okay. Feeling the raisin. Smelling the raisin. Touching the raisin. Seeing the raisin. All right, I think I'm done eating just because I'm bored.
That was my observation. I gotta say, even though I didn't necessarily do any other activity while eating, I don't know if I truly mindfully ate, because I actually found myself like towards the end, because I was kind of getting bored. I was almost eating really fast just because I wanted to get it over with, which I don't think you're supposed to do that.
Even if I'm like, wow, the whatever, eating is really freaking boring. Especially like, I eat a lot of like, for breakfast, I eat the same thing most days, oatmeal. Like, it's kind of just the same.
I will say the only thing is I did feel like I was appreciating the flavors of food more.
I had the same experience with like, I've been on a very big Caesar salad kick where I've been making my own Caesar salad dressing. And like, Caesar salad dressing is kind of a weird thing if you actually look at the ingredients, but like tasting it with the mindfulness, I'm like, oh, I taste the lemon, I taste this. Like, it's very, that was good.
It does actually make you enjoy your food more. I'm just sitting here with a Caesar salad that I made for myself. I made the dressing, I made the croutons myself, and I've had a couple bites already, and I feel like having been through the process of making everything myself and then taking the bites, I can like see all the ingredients that I put in. Because Caesar salad dressing, if you ever made it, is kind of like a weird dressing. It's like a bunch of random ingredients, but I can really taste everything. And like, it makes me, I don't know, it makes me like sitting here and tasting it, I feel like I'm tasting it more.
But like, yeah. I had a smoothie. I did, it's just, take one sip, that's the sip for the whole thing.
I'm having a smoothie and I realized a smoothie is not a fun thing to mindfully eat, because every single sip is exactly the same. Texture, the same. Taste, the same. I've already taken a few sips. It's actually a pretty good smoothie. Banana, strawberry, or not banana, there's no banana because I didn't have any, but mango, strawberry. But I do think that's going to get a little repetitive.
It's a little too uniform. I think a huge part of it is like, I've been eating, I guess, a certain way. Like anytime that I'm by myself, I have like my little ritual. It occurred to me that I think I got into that habit of like putting on a show or whatever when I'm eating alone when I was doing my engineering degree. Like, so this was like over a decade ago. So, you know, every time I'm eating alone, put on a show right before I sit down. I mean, this is like over 10 years of doing things in a particular way that I'm having to unlearn. Having that secondary or accompanying entertainment is just like part of that ritual, and I always make sure that it's ready to go before I even sit down. That's why I kept forgetting, because I was just so used to doing things in a certain way.
We have our habits, and this shows like how hard habits are to change or to break or to make when it comes to anything. And like the longer those habits have been ingrained, you know, the harder it is. But yeah, definitely eating by yourself, so freaking boring.
I became a lot more aware of all the noises that my condo makes. I gotta say, I'm a lot more aware of all the sounds that my condo makes. I don't know if I like that. I didn't really like that.
We've talked a little bit about our experience with mindfulness. Last week we started this challenge and we talked about, you know, mindful eating, where it came from, what it is. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go check it out. But just a little recap of what mindful eating is. It's about bringing a present awareness into the act of eating, preparing food, which I didn't do that. Eating, preparing food, you know, choosing food, making sure that you are aware of that while that's happening. And I think, you know, as a culture, that's kind of so foreign from what we typically do. Typically, you're, you know, eating lunch in front of the computer at work, or you're watching Netflix while you're eating dinner, or just so many different things. It's really about going against what we're so conditioned to do as a culture, to really just be present and in the moment and feel everything and sense everything about eating the food in your mouth, feel how your body reacts to it, how to grapple with different thoughts you have about food. It's a very complex topic.
Mindfulness in general, and then mindful eating is specifically as well, I think it's almost exclusively talked about as this really positive thing that's super beneficial. We can all benefit from it. We'll see all sorts of positive changes if we were just more mindful as we ate. Is that actually true? So let's talk about that.
Let's go into the evidence on it. As Rabina was saying, is like we've always been told like mindfulness, really, really good. But we're gonna get into what the evidence is saying. I have good news for you if you have binge eating disorder.
Now, I think binging is a word that gets thrown around rather nonchalantly in public discourse, whether you're talking about food or TV shows or whatever. But binge eating disorder is a very serious and clinically recognized eating disorder. What it entails is recurring episodes of uncontrollable overeating. Typically, people that are going through this, they'll have episodes where they're consuming large quantities of foods in a relatively short period of time, and the experience is often of feeling out of control over the food and over the eating itself. This is very different from just simple overeating, which I think everyone experiences now and again. Binge eating disorder specifically is a serious condition, and you know, if you think that you might be experiencing binge eating disorder, definitely connect with a physician.
Since binge eating disorder is a psychiatric condition, there are a lot of different treatments for it. A lot of them are therapy-based techniques, and within that, mindfulness has been studied both in like an eating domain and also in a like just general life domain. And what we tend to see is that for people with binge eating disorder, practicing mindful eating, practicing mindfulness in general within the context of different forms of therapy generally is beneficial. We see reductions in the frequency and severity of binge eating symptoms, and also general improvements in mental health. So we see reductions in things like anxiety and depression.
As promising as that sounds, it's worth noting that there's a lot of limitations to the evidence base that we have right now. There isn't really a super formal or consistent definition of mindful eating. The approaches that are used to kind of perform mindful eating, I don't know if that's the right word, or do mindful eating, that's not consistent either. It's difficult to know for sure if it should be necessarily kind of one of the frontline approaches for treating binge eating disorder.
This limitation where there's not a fixed definition and a fixed, you know, this is the protocol for mindful eating is really true throughout everything we talk about today. All these different studies will mention mindful eating and mindfulness in the context of eating, but not really have consistent results. So it's hard for us to really find like what's true and what is not true. When we're talking about the context of binge eating disorders specifically, a lot of times these studies will have mindful eating as just one component of the treatment. And so it's hard to see if it's actually the mindful eating itself that's playing a role, or if it's mindful eating in conjunction with the other treatment, or maybe just the other thing. So we haven't really been able to see if mindful eating is more effective than other forms of treatment. Generally, when we look at the evidence where people with binge eating disorder do mindful eating compared to nothing, mindful eating is beneficial, but when it's mindful eating compared to another form of treatment, the results aren't as great there.
Another area that's been looked at to see what the effects of mindful eating is emotional eating. Emotional eating is essentially the act of kind of eating in response to emotions rather than physical hunger. So whether that's sadness, anger, even happiness or stress, eating in response to that rather than physical hunger. There are several intervention type trials that look at the effects of a mindfulness program, how that affects episodes of emotional eating. In one particular randomized control trial, the mindfulness program was essentially a 7-week program where the participants were taught about being aware of their levels of hunger, being aware of the difference between physical hunger versus responding to external cues, being able to be more aware, so maybe get some of the automatic processes involved in their eating patterns, as well as learning to enjoy food while being conscious, all of this stuff. It does seem like that type of mindfulness intervention programs can be helpful at reducing emotional eating.
That being said, there is a little bit of limited research in this area. Definitely more needs to be done. A big focus of the emotional eating studies were only done in really people who are overweight or obese. So it's really hard to know if this tracks or applies to other groups of people. When we're talking about things like emotional eating, some of these studies also included people who had disordered eating or eating disorders and then included that. So that might kind of haze up the results a little bit, because we do know that the psychology of emotional eating may be different for those groups of people versus the general population. And also, emotional eating, it's great to listen to your body, but sometimes it does just happen. So there's no need to feel like guilty if it's an occasional thing. If you think it's getting in the way of, the way you want to live your life, then maybe that's a big thing. But I will let you know, like, if I'm at a birthday party, I'm not actively hungry, I'm going to have a piece of cake because I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's more of a concern if it's your primary coping mechanism. But speaking of kind of the examples that you gave, that's kind of an example of external eating, right? Kind of eating in response to external cues, whether it's time of day, location, rather than maybe how hungry or full you're actually feeling. I think this is something that everyone experiences. Like if you go to a certain restaurant and they put down bread in front of you, we're just gonna end up eating it whether we really like it or not. And I'm certainly guilty of this even on a day-to-day basis. I think eating in response to time of day or kind of what the schedule looks like. I don't know if it's always realistic to kind of eat based on when you're hungry and then like stopping when you're full. I'm just like a little over halfway through the food that I plated up. I'm realizing that I'm actually starting to get full and satisfied already. However, I have a whole bunch of back-to-back meetings coming up and I'm not gonna have a chance to stop and eat again for a few hours. So even though I kind of do feel satisfied right now, I think I am going to finish this because I don't want to kind of be sitting in those meetings feeling hungry in a few hours. The few meals that I did eat mindfully, the biggest thing that I learned was that, because like I'm used to plating up a certain amount of food, I think like somewhere between like 50 to 60%, like as I'm finishing up 50 to 60% of my food that's on my plate, like I'm actually starting to feel rather full and satisfied. So I did realize that maybe I need less food to reach that state of satiety. But then most of the time it's like, well, if I don't eat right now, I'm not gonna be able to eat for like another 3-4 hours. So I'm gonna finish what's in front of me.
Absolutely. I think that like mindful eating as like almost like an thing to achieve, like an idealize and achieve. But at the end of the day, like, if I am in a meeting for 3 hours, I'm going to eat before that, whether or not I'm hungry, because I know that at the end of the meeting, I'm going to be really hangry. Yeah. You have to be like very privileged to be able to do this perfectly, where if you work a shift work job, like you can't be like,
oh, sorry, I'm going to have to, I feel my body is hungry. I'm going to have to take a break.
We need to be aware that mindful eating has its limitations, and sometimes you have to like plan for your life.
There are other variables to consider, but can mindfulness be helpful in reducing external eating? And yeah, it turns out that it can, which kind of makes sense. Even the example of like sitting down in a restaurant, they put bread in front of you, like that, like the number of times like I've been with people who will like try the bread and they're like, oh, I don't actually like it, but then they'll still like kind of keep eating it. And I think it is because like when food is in front of you, it feels like you're supposed to eat it, because, and I think we might just associate that restaurant environment with, I'm in a restaurant, I'm supposed to be eating right now, and so we're just kind of eating, even though you might not really necessarily be hungry for it, you might not even be enjoying it. I'm sure if you were actually like consciously aware, like, hey, why am I eating this when I don't even actually want it and I'm not enjoying it, that mindfulness in that moment probably would end up changing your behavior.
I actually went out for lunch with one of my friends. I was telling her we're doing this mindful eating thing, so we talked about mindful eating, and we took like some mindful bites where we like, you know, tasted it and everything.
Immerse yourself in it.
Okay.
All the sensory senses. So
Okay, I'm gonna start with the,
yeah. Oh, do you want to go mindful eat a fry if you want?
yes, I would love to try practice my mindful eating of a fry. Would you like a ketchup
I'll have some.
or
Yeah, I'll have some.
mayonnaise or both?
I'll have both.
You can
But
mix both.
okay, so
What do I do?
so just
Maybe
smell
I'll
it. You feel it. Okay, and then
I feel it.
taste it.
It's hot.
So you feel it, the hot sensation in your mouth. Like a little bit of tanginess from the ketchup, the sweetness from the
Mayo.
mayonnaise, and then you know you got like nice potato flavor.
Yeah.
You feel how it feels in your body. You feel it going down your esophagus into your stomach.
I love like your invitation of mindful eating is just like I'm a goddess of my body or
That's
whatever.
what I feel like it is. But anyway, so we were there. I was like, yes, Jan, this is how you mindfully eat. Eat your burger, taste it, blah, 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 blah. So we did that. It was fun. But then also, like, she had fries, and she's like, oh, you can have some of my fries if you want. I was mindful. I was listening to my body. I had, like, one fry, and I was like, you know what? I've had enough. My body has had enough.
Yeah. And would that have been different from if you
I think
weren't?
so. I think so, because we were just chatting, and I feel like I would have been, like, nibbling on the fries as we were just chatting after we were done eating.
I think like little experiences like that is why that assumption that, oh, if you were to mindfully eat, you would end up eating less comes from. Because I think everyone probably has had an experience like that, where when they like pause to really evaluate, they do maybe end up choosing to stop.
When we look at the qualitative data on mindful eating and eating behaviors, people tend to find it very empowering. People report that it increases their self-efficacy. So that basically is their belief that they are actually able to do it.
Most of the time when people talk about mindful eating is what we're discussing, which is like if we're really present, we think that, oh yeah, how much we'll end up eating while we're being present is going to change. First of all, the evidence is quite mixed on this, and it seems like in a lot of cases, how much you eat in that particular sitting might not change, but it's possible that how much you change later in the day might actually change.
In the cases where we see that mindful eating reduces energy intake, which again is kind of mixed, it's typically at a subsequent meal or snack.
The proposed mechanism for that is that, you know, if we're more mindful and present, we might just have a stronger memory associated with how much we ate in the hours prior, and that might end up affecting how much we want to eat at the following eating opportunity. I didn't mindfully eat any snack, I don't think. My focus in the beginning was like, I'm just going to try to get my meals mindfully eaten. I was failing hard at that.
Yeah.
Actually, my first coffee the first day, I was like, ooh, this like the mug feels so nice. And
nothing like that first sip of coffee in the morning. I was working on my computer, but for the first sip, I did decide to step away so I can truly appreciate the aroma and the temperature and all of that. Love that. I love the feeling of like a warm mug in my hand. I feel like 80% of the reason why I drink coffee or tea is just how soothing it is to have a warm mug in your hand.
Oh, well, that's actually a great segue. So when we're talking about reducing specific foods,
I didn't even mean to do that.
Well, great work.
Happy accident.
When we're talking about reducing specific foods, there is some very limited, not great evidence that maybe mindful eating can help us reduce specific foods. Specifically, there was one study that was done where they had a group of people drink unsweetened coffee. So they were trying to get people to reduce added sugar to their coffee for 14 days. And they were asked to do so mindfully, doing, you know, kind of the raisin exercise, but with their coffee, feeling the warmth, smelling, tasting, all that different stuff. And then 6 months later, they looked at their sugar intake in their coffee. A group of people who were asked to do it mindfully versus the people who were just told like, hey, like just like don't drink coffee with sugar in it for 14 days. At 6 months later, there was like more of them that were like not drinking as much sugar in their coffees. Also, when we think about mindful eating, I think the two biggest things we think about are, you know, being aware of the sensory experience of eating in terms of like the taste, the texture, all this different stuff, as well as being present in our body. When we look at is being aware of like our body signals and our cues and stuff like that, does that actually affect how much we eat? There's not great research. Again, with everything else we've said, it's pretty mixed. In some studies, they're showing that when you're focusing on your bodily sensations, it reduces intake of a high calorie snack. Some studies show that there's no effect. Some studies show there's an effect only if you're hungry. Some studies show only if you're satiated there's an effect. So the data is not great, which makes me think that perhaps it's not as an effective strategy as we would think, because otherwise we'd see consistent results. But what's really interesting is that there's actually a concern that being too present of your bodily sensations makes us overly aware of hunger. People are really good at being like, oh, I'm hungry, and thinking of that, but we're not really good at thinking of like, oh, I'm satiated. Perhaps focusing on that feeling of hunger intensifies the hunger and leads us to eating more.
I think like typically when we're hungry, we already have a little bit more urgency. It's already kind of distracting, but if we maybe zone in on it, perhaps that does get amplified even further.
Satiety is kind of like an absence of discomfort, whereas hunger is an uncomfortable feeling.
Seeking relief from hunger is a stronger motivation there rather than accepting the fact that you're full. So it's kind of the takeaway here. Ultimately, I've kind of said this the whole video, but mindful eating, the evidence base is quite mixed. Seems like with certain situations like emotional eating or binge eating disorder, there possibly could be some benefits at reducing kind of the frequency or severity of those types of eating episodes. But that being said, should mindful eating ever be kind of your sole strategy at navigating those situations? Probably not. Definitely not with binge eating disorder.
Go see a doctor, please. The evidence right now is limited. What is out there is kind of really mixed. And because we just don't have this definition, these studies are so different that it's hard to really put everything together and come up with a conclusion. It might be helpful in some situations. So for you, if you're an individual and you find mindful eating really helpful for you, you know, go for it. Keep it up. If it's something that you're going to do by itself to achieve a specific goal, maybe worth incorporating that with another behavioral change to get to where your goal is. Because based off of what is out there right now, it just doesn't really support mindful eating as a sole strategy to improve, you know, eating behaviors or food choices and things like that.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok.